How's it going, guys? It's your boy Kanji FPL and we are back with another YouTube video. On today's video, we're going to be going through my first FPL draft. I've been in the lab. I've been cooking up something nice for you guys. But before we jump into it, I think we have to actually go through different players and different price points to understand why I picked the players that I did. I feel like the best place to start is just going to be the midfielders in FPL. From a striker perspective, everyone's pretty much set and forget on Haaland, especially in the beginning. And for that second striker position, I think you're just better off starting with an 8.0 and then downgrading elsewhere whenever you feel like the fixtures change for other strikers. So you can move to someone like Gakpo or Nkunku at 7.5 if you start with an 8.0. So just starting with any sort of 8.0 is good. You can always move to a Watkins or a Wilson too. So I just think starting with someone like Jesus makes a lot of sense because he has good fixtures in the beginning. It's like Crystal Palace, Fulham. It's like some easy things in the beginning, so you can just take it how it goes. And if you think Jesus is out of form, you can just sell him right away. And there's going to be options available after a couple weeks, given the information you'll get. So the fact that I already sort of have my forward position set, I'm more focused on the midfielders because there's just so much choice right in midfield. And that's why I'm leaning towards building a 3-5-2 draft. But for me, it's more important to get the structure and the price point correct than to get the player correct. And so that's why I really want to start with one of Rashford or Son because they're the most expensive mids. So Rashford was the Manchester United number 9 last year for pretty much most of the season because Weghorst and Martial were not good or injured. There's just so much inconsistency with Manchester United. But the two players you can count on are Rashford and Fernandes. And that's why Rashford just put up so much XG. In fact, almost all of his XGI is actually XG. It's incredible what Rashford can do. And it's not just that. Like Son, 2 years ago, he put up 250 points in FPL. Like he was a Golden Boot winner. Like Son has FPL pedigree. Like I love Son. Like he always has a smile on his face. And like he's just the type of guy that, from an FPL perspective, he's an incredible finisher. So he's the type of guy that can really break FPL when he's hot. So you really want to be able to jump onto them if they start off hot. And that's why starting with one of them is really important to me from a price point perspective. And for me, it's just simple. Like Son didn't play that great last season, and he's looking to have a bounce back year. Rashford was just insane last year. So you just start with Rashford, keep it simple. And if you want to be able to move to Son, you have the opportunity to do so. But after that, it's like you're really looking at that 8.5 million bracket. And to me, those Arsenal mids just stand out like a sore thumb. I cannot believe these guys are priced at 8.5. Saka, Odegaard, and Martinelli should all be 9.5 to 10 million assets. Like, these guys are just way underpriced. I couldn't believe it. The fact that Saka and Odegaard are priced the same at 8.5 doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know who prices these players, but it just doesn't make sense. Like Saka is on penalties, so you're obviously always going to take Saka over Odegaard. And the problem is Odegaard is my favorite player, so they kind of just price Odegaard out of the game for me. And now it's like, if you want to go for Martinelli, that makes sense. You're paying 0.5 less, you get the rotation risk, you get the minutes risk, but you get the money savings. So that's kind of why it's like, I think Odegaard's not really an asset, but Martinelli is still on the table. However, I just think it just comes down to penalties. It just gives you an extra 2 or 3 easy goals, and the fact you're only paying 0.5 extra, you might as well, right? Speaking of penalties, the guy that comes to mind is Bruno Fernandes. The guy really underperformed last season. Like when we look at players like Rashford, Son, Saka, Odegaard, Bruno actually had higher XGI than all of them. And it's just incredible because he underperformed almost all the Arsenal mids and Rashford. And the thing is with Bruno, he had the most chances created last season. He's really creative and he's an Iron Man. He plays every single game. You can trust him to be on the team sheet week in and week out. And that's the thing about Bruno is that he only had 2 penalties last year. And we got to put that in perspective, right? ManCity had 10 pens. Manchester United had 3. And Ronaldo, I think, took 1 of them. So Bruno only had 2. Arsenal had 4 pens. Liverpool had 4 pens. So I just think there's a reversion to the mean incoming next season. I wouldn't be surprised if Liverpool, Arsenal, and United all got 5 or more penalties next season. And if you just think about Bruno's statistics, right? He only scored 2 pens, right? If we gave him like 3 more penalties on top of his score here, he'd probably be at the 195 point score, given like the bonus points he'd get on top of that because he creates so many chances. Bruno can essentially just be a set and forget option at 8.5. But I also feel that like you're better off starting with Bruno because you can always move down to someone like Martinelli or Foden, Grealish, or Madison if they start off hot as well. And it just gives you time. Like starting with Saka and starting with Fernandes is safe because you know what their floor is. It's really high. They're going to guarantee you at least 180 points next season. You don't really have to worry too much about them. They're nailed in their teams. They pretty much play all the minutes. There's no replacement for them in the squad, and they're like glue players to your team. Like you don't have to worry about them, and you can take the risks elsewhere in your squad. Moving on from the mid-price mids, let's move to like the lower tier mids, and that's kind of where we get to the 7.0 to 6.0 bracket. And for me, Bowen's the one that stands out above everyone else because 2 seasons ago, he had a 210-point season. Like he was on fire. And then last year, West Ham sort of fell off the map in the league. They were fighting a relegation battle at some points, but it was kind of overshadowed and it was sort of pushed to the side because they did win the Conference League. So they did win a trophy. Like they did something in Europe, you know? Like he has FPL pedigree. And the thing is with him is that he had an XGI of 9.6 and he scored 6 goals. So he just underperformed his XG. And I just wouldn't be surprised if next season we're looking at it like he had 180 points because what he did is he had the same exact XGI of 15, but he finished the chances this time. Like it wouldn't surprise me at all. And so that's kind of why I think I have my eye on Bowen in preseason. He started off really hot. I think he has 2 goals and 2 assists already in the first 2 games. He's a talisman of the team. The only problem with Bowen is that the team doesn't create that many chances. Like when we compare Bowen's team to someone like Brighton, it's just night and day. I remember looking at some statistics on Twitter post-World Cup where Brighton had created the most XG of any team in all of the top 5 leagues. So you really got to keep Brighton in context. They're going to be one of the most disrespected teams, I think, because people are always going to think of the big teams like Manchester United, Manchester City, Arsenal. And it's like if you're going to pay 8.5 for players like Jesus or Martinelli or Saka, why not pay 6.5 for players like Mitoma and March? Because Brighton created more XG than teams like Arsenal and Newcastle last season. So it's just crazy to me that 6.5 for Mitoma, it just seems like the biggest lock. And you can just set that in there and move on. I know Gross is going to be on pens given the fact that McAllister is leaving, but it's just why pick someone that's going to be playing CDM? Like why wouldn't you just pick the left winger? That's just kind of where my thoughts are at least. And to me, Eze's just not even in the conversation because the team doesn't create enough XG. And that's kind of the same issue with Bowen. Is like the teams don't create enough XG where they're just over-reliant on their talisman players. And the thing that's not in Bowen's favor is he's not on penalties. The thing going against Eze is that Olise actually picked up a hamstring injury in the under-21 tournament. And so he's going to be out for the first 7 games. And that kind of means that Eze is going to be the main guy. The opposition is going to know that too, and so he's likely just going to get doubled and played out of the game. So instinctively, I feel like just avoiding Gross and Eze just makes sense in the beginning. And the same thing goes for Almiron. Almiron had the biggest purple patch I've ever seen. It was like super obvious. This was like a guy playing out of his skin. And I don't know if that's just a flash in the pan or he's just gone to a different level. But for now, that's just going to be an avoid. But this is the thing. Bryan Mbeumo is the player that stands out. At the 6.5 price point, he had the most XGI involvement. And last year, he was a striker in FPL. And so he probably got less points for goals, and he got less points because he didn't get any clean sheet points. If he was a mid, he would have. So given the fact he got 150 points last year, if he was a mid, he probably would have got 160 points. And then it's like you're looking at someone that got 160 points, and now this season, they're going to be on penalties because Tony's not going to be there for the first half of the season because of the gambling ban. And that's why I think Mbeumo is also going to be really disrespected and underrated. I feel like on Twitter, it'll be a different vibe, but most casuals aren't even going to think to put Mbeumo into their team. And even if they do, they're going to be scraping around for 0.5 or 1.0 to upgrade them to players like Madison or Foden, given any opportunity that they can. But my instinct is just telling me that Mbeumo is great value at 6.5 and he'll be able to match the 7.5s and he'll allow you to spend that value elsewhere in the squad. But I really wanted to give a quick shout out to Gibbs White. He really took things over for Nottingham Forest in the second half of the season. The problem with him is that he just has a tendency to have more XA than XG. And also, the issue is, like, I don't know if Brendan Johnson is going to be there next year. So I know that Gibbs White is probably going to be on penalties, which is a good thing. But then is that a bad thing for Mbeumo? Because if Brendan Johnson is coming in, is Mbeumo going to have more of a rotation risk on the right wing? So that's just something I'm going to monitor to see how that evolves. But Overall, my instinct is just telling me that at this price point, I think Mbeumo is the best option, and that's closely followed behind by Mitoma. And to me, Mitoma was the biggest lock in my team at 6.5. So if Mitoma's a lock, Mbeumo has to be a lock. And that's kind of it for the mids. There's no one else that's really on my radar for now, but let's just see how preseason evolves. Moving right on to the defenders. This is the toughest part because there's just so much value in defense. Like Schär is 5.0, Gabriel is 5.0, Estupinian is 5.0. Then you have the 5.5s of like Luke Shaw, who's nailed, Stones, who plays like CDM for ManCity, Ruben Diaz, who's the most nailed ManCity defender. And then you go to the premiums where you have Trippier at 6.5 and Trent at 8. And this is the thing that has me really confused. I'm not exactly sure whether I should be going for somebody like Trent or Trips, or should I just go for like the cheaper options and spend the money elsewhere? Like I'm really confused on what the right thing to do is. But the one thing that I know for sure is that Gabriel is underpriced. Because whenever I was comparing him before the prices came out, I was comparing him to Diaz and Shaw and Stones. So the fact that Gabriel is 5.0, he is the biggest lock in my team. I don't think anything in preseason will change it. The signing of Timber, he's a right-sided center back. Gabriel's minutes are locks in the team. In fact, because Saliba is going to be there this time for the whole season, hopefully, I expect Arsenal to even keep more clean sheets than they did last season. So I feel like Gabriel's floor is way higher than it was last season. So he's a super lock. After Gabriel, the next value option to me is Estupinian. Estupinian is kind of similar to Luke Shaw, where they have similar minutes played, similar expected goal involvement. Estupinian is slightly higher, and that's kind of why Estupinian also has higher actual attacking returns. Even from a clean sheet perspective, though, United had more clean sheets, but if we look at the expected goals conceded, it's very similar. So if they're kind of similar, why would you pay 5.5 for Shaw when you can just pay 5.0 for Estupinian? And instinctively, like you're always going to be leaning towards Shaw because he plays for the bigger team, and maybe they'll spend more money and they'll have better players in their team, but Brighton are really underrated. And I just think that Estupinian is really solid value at 5.0 over the course of the season. And I think the same with Gabriel. And that's why regardless of which drafts I make, I feel like these two are super locked in it. They're just great options, especially given the fixtures as well. But the hardest part for me to understand is whether to go for players like Schär as the third option and go super value in defense, or to go for players like Trippier and Trent. And that's where I don't know what the right choice is. Trent looks absolutely ripped this offseason. I've never seen him more fit before. And he really has a point to prove because he's trying to earn that spot in midfield. Given the fact that Liverpool played so well in the last 10 games of last season, I'm tempted to start the season with him. But I just feel like there's so much value elsewhere. Like everyone is so underpriced. Like all the Arsenal players are underpriced. The ManCity defenders, like we're talking about a team that has the least XGC, like almost 2 times as good as Liverpool. And you could just have the ManCity defender at 5.5. He's almost like half the price of Trent. Like you're saving 2.5 million. So you could have like a Ruben Diaz and just spend that 2.5 in midfield instead of having somebody like Mbeumo. You could have Heung-min Son and hope that that combination of ManCity plus Son is better than Trent and Mbeumo, right? So it's like that's kind of the decision that I'm kind of stuck with right now. But my instinct tells me that Trent can be a game breaker all in his own. He can average 14 goals and assists easily. He put up 13 this year and we played garbage. Liverpool kept 14 clean sheets, by the way, even though we played terrible. And I know Trent was subbed off early in the first half of the season because Klopp was rotating with the squad, trying to find the best players. But everyone knows Trent is the best player or second best player in this team right now. He's the talisman of the team. Him and Salah are going to start every single game. I'd be surprised if Trent is ever subbed off before like the 85th minute mark in any game this year, especially given the fact that we're going to be in Europa League and also given the fact that top 5 are going to make Champions League this year. So I feel like Klopp is really just going to play the kids in the Europa League, but we'll see how that evolves. Either way, I still think that Trent can easily put up another 14 attacking returns and another 14 clean sheets because Liverpool put up 14 clean sheets. So that'll be what? That'll be 28 returns. And on top of that, he averages 25 bonus points per season. So that's like another 5 returns. So you're kind of looking at what? 14 plus 14, that's 28 plus 5. So it's like you're looking at what? 32, 33 returns. So it's like he's pretty much just a set and forget option over the course of the season. And I think we could just be overthinking it. Like he's 8.0 and he's just a set and forget. He could be a complete lock. It just really depends on how you want to look at things. Because you could also look at it from this perspective, like Trippier had an XGI of 14.4, and he only got FPL attacking returns of 10. So he really underperformed his XGI. And you know why? It's because of players like Shaw and Botman. Like Shaw had an XGI of 7, but he only had 4 because he missed a bunch of XG. He missed a bunch of headers from corners and free kicks from Trippier. So it really just seems like Trippier's attacking returns are repeatable. And then if we look at the clean sheets, like Newcastle have a better defense than Liverpool. Newcastle have a better defense than Arsenal. So it's like if a team is going to put up 14 and 15 clean sheets again, why would it surprise you that Newcastle did it again? It wouldn't surprise me. So if I'm thinking that Trent is a set and forget option, Trippier is also a set and forget option. So I'm really, really torn about which defenders to go to, but the ones that I know for sure is that Gabriel and Estupiñán are definitely players that I want from a value perspective. Now that we're done the FPL defenders and the midfielders, it is time for me to show you my first draft. I'm really torn between the two, and these are the two that I'm stuck between. I have a Trent with no depth draft, and I also have a Ruben Diaz plus depth plus a 1.0 in the bank. And so the thing is, Rashford, Fernandes, Saka, Jesus, and Haaland are in all of my drafts. I'm not even the biggest fan of Jesus. I just really like the fact that he has good fixtures. He's an 8.0 and I can move anywhere I want to after him. And also, Matoma and Mbumo are just the enablers of my team. I think they're really good value at 6.5. And also, Estupiñán and Gabriel are the two main defenders that are in all of my drafts. So it really just comes down to this position of, what am I going to do with Trent? Like, do I really need the depth? Like, if one of my guys is injured for a week in this sort of draft, I have to get rid of them. But if it was with this sort of version where I have the depth, like let's say Mbumo has like a family thing and he doesn't play for 1 week, then it's like I have to sell him in this version. But with the depth, I could just bench him and play someone like Chilwell off the bench. So that just gives me more options. And you're probably wondering, like, what is Chilwell doing there? Like, I'm not even the biggest fan of what Chelsea have done last season. I think it's going to take them time to gel under Pochettino, but I'm a fan of what Poch did at Spurs. I think he's going to do well at Chelsea. I just think it's going to take time to settle in. And the fact that they have good fixtures in the beginning, it's like, it's a punt to go with Chilwell. But I'm keeping my options open because in this draft, I do have 1.0. And I feel like if Mbumo doesn't start well, he's going to be the top of everyone's shopping list to sell. And I think having this 1.0 will allow me to get to someone like Foden or allow me to get to someone like Maddison in the midfield. But I want to explain why I have Chilwell in that defense in the depth draft. And it's because when you look at Estupiñán's fixtures in the beginning, it's Luton and Wolves. West Ham, you could play him, but if you had Chilwell off the bench, you could play Luton at home, Nottingham Forest at home, Bournemouth away, and then go back to Estupiñán for that Bournemouth at home, and then come back to Chilwell for Fulham, Burnley, and then this is game week 9. It's a tough fixture, but then you're back to Estupiñán with Fulham and Everton. So it's a really good rotation, and that's the thing. When you spend all your money on someone like Trent, you're sacrificing the depth of the squad. And that's the thing I'm really unsure about. Like, I know Trent has the upside. He can be a 210-point defender. And it's hard to even get defenders that are 150 points. So it's like you get the pros with Trent, but you also get the cons with it, where it's like you're unable to rotate Estupiñán. Instead of rotating him, I would just have to spend a lot of my transfers on that position. Or I would maybe just have to not start with Estupiñán. So that's kind of where I'm really torn. And I'm not sure exactly what to do. But the thing that I'm really set on is actually just going to be Mbumo and Flecken. Both of them are pretty set in my team. I'm pretty solid on Mbumo because he's on the penalties. The fixtures are absolutely gorgeous. Spurs, Fulham, Palace, Bournemouth, Newcastle, that's going to be really difficult. Everton and Forest. So in the first 7 games, it's just really solid. And like Spurs defensively, like they're terrible last season. So given the fact it's the first game and Postecoglou really is talking about attacking football, isn't really mentioning defense in any of his interviews. So I think that's going to be a good attacking fixtures for Mbumo. So I just think there's so many good fixtures. He's on penalties, 6.5, good fixtures. And I think the same thing goes with Flecken, where Brentford's system is interesting, where they allow a lot of shots on goal, but it's very low XG shots. So it's like the keeper is getting saves, which is good for FPL. And it's going to just give him more potential chance for bonus points. So that's the thing. It's just, at the end of the day, it's like a 4.5 goalkeeper that I have. And there's also the risk that Raya stays, right? Raya was looking to leave, trying to go to a bigger team. I feel like he'd have to swallow his pride to come back and stay at Brentford. So that's kind of why I think, regardless of what happens, I think he's out the door. But let's see what happens. I got my eye on this spot. The real key question is going to be Trent or no Trent. And when you think about Liverpool, you think about the last 10 games they had. They played against 7 of like the bottom half teams last year. They were really easy fixtures. Trent was on fire. Like, he was playing really well. Like, you can see he was in like a purple patch in that moment. And so he could have just been overperforming his statistics. And there could just be that recency bias that draws me towards him. But I got to remember, he is a game breaker. But these fixtures don't really scream clean sheets to me. This Bournemouth at home game looks incredible though. And it's crazy because Holland has Newcastle at home. So it's like, if you wanted to, you have the guts, you could really go and captain Trent in this game. Like last season, Trent put up 17 points in this game. And he was playing at wing back. Imagine what he could do in midfield, right? But that just seems a step too far, man. Erling Haaland is just insane. And the fact you're going to pay 14 million for him, you better be captaining a guy like that, right? But either way, so like Liverpool have like a Bournemouth fixture where I could see a clean, a Wolves fixture where I could see a clean, West Ham maybe, but I feel like on the counter, Antonio or Bowen could probably nick something. And this Chelsea game, last season, I think we played them 3 times, and Liverpool and Chelsea was 0-0, like every single time. So this could also be a clean. But I just still feel like there's 2 potential cleans, and on top of that, I just feel like he'll probably take over with probably 2 assists. So over the first 7 games, I'm expecting 4 returns. And that's kind of where I juxtapose that with ManCity, who they have Burnley on the first day. This is like the opening day of the entire season. So they have a newly promoted team, another newly promoted team. Then they have Fulham. Then they have West Ham, who they cleaned twice against last season. Then they have Nottingham Forest at home and Wolves. Like, those are 6 cleanable games. And then when we think about their percentages to get it clean, it's probably going to be around like 66%. So of the first 7 games, they're going to have 6 games where they could clean. 66%, that's probably like 4 games. So in the first 7 games, I'm expecting 4 clean sheets. So it's like, okay, like a Man City defender can kind of match what Trent is doing in the beginning. But after that, bro, it's not even close. Obviously, at this point, you would have sold your Man City defender if you own them. But it's like the fixtures from 8 onwards are incredible for Liverpool. So it's hard for any defender to even match Trent. And you probably want to own Trent during that time. But regardless, you can always move to Trent, as long as you just don't spread the funds too thin. And that's kind of why my instinct is kind of leading me towards this no Trent draft. But that's just kind of where I am right now. Things can change. I've really got my eye on that Mbumo spot. I do have 1.0 in the bank, so I could get to a Foden. If Foden's definitely not going to be an option, I would probably switch Chilwell to Stones, or probably start Stones over Ruben Diaz. But at the end of the day, I'm picking Ruben Diaz for the X minutes. Like last season, towards the end of the season, Pep kind of showed his hand. Like, he showed that Diaz is like the nailed defender. He started every single game that mattered. And when the games didn't matter and they already won the Premier League, like, Ruben Diaz was benched just like all the other good players were too. So my instinct tells me that if I go for Man City defender, go for the X-Mins, go for Ruben Diaz, don't go for Stones, because Stones he has more attacking upside because he plays in midfield, but he also has more rotation risk. And so many games, like, he was subbed off early. But that's the thing. Like, I was there in the stadium with my bro. We were in the Etihad Stadium for that Leicester Man City game. By the way, I'm from Toronto, so this was like my one time I was watching Man City, and I remember watching Stones score. And I was like, man, like, this is ridiculous. Like, this guy's a defender, and he's like scoring a goal. It's kind of like on the edge of the box. And it's crazy. Like, Man City fans absolutely love John Stones. And it's surprising because Man City fans don't really get that hyped. I guess they're so used to greatness, and their fan base doesn't have as much history. But it's like, for Stones, man, they go crazy for Johnny, man. But either way, my instinct tells me separate the emotional side of it. And Ruben Diaz is probably the best player. These are kind of where my thoughts are right now. Just wanted to thank you so much for taking the time. If I provided some value to you, please drop a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all again soon. Peace.